The American illicit drugs market is the biggest in the world, worth annually more than $80 billion. Last year, federal authorities intercepted 7,000 pounds of cocaine, 3 times the amount seized the previous year.
The drug smuggling operation is highly organized, and there are plenty of people prepared to risk imprisonment for the large amounts of money offered by the dealers. Some will even go through the uncomfortable process of swallowing plastic bags filled with narcotics, something that can end in death if the bags burst.
Smuggled in this delicious fruit was cocaine. Andrew Thornton fell to his death carrying too heavy of a load of cocaine while parachuting.
The U.S. Marine Corps has just revealed some shocking and downright mind-blowing tactics that drug cartels are using to smuggle their illegal goods into the United States. We're talking about methods that are so bizarre and creative, it's almost hard to believe they're real. From hidden compartments in vehicles to tunnels running beneath the border, these cartels are taking smuggling to a whole new level. What's more terrifying is how they're constantly evolving, using new and more inventive ways to bypass law enforcement and keep the flow of drugs going. In this deep dive, we'll uncover some of the wildest and most ingenious smuggling strategies the Marines have exposed, strategies that highlight just how determined and resourceful these criminal organizations have become. It's a glimpse into the dangerous game being played right under our noses and the lengths cartels will go to in order to stay one step ahead.
Over the last decade, particularly emerging from Colombia, there have been a set of semi-submersibles, a couple of which have been caught by the US Coast Guard, which don't fully submerge but just appear above the water, and they've also been used to take cocaine up the coast and bypass the border.
The US has the biggest illicit drug market in the world, worth more than $80 billion every year. That's a wild amount, and it's no surprise that the drug trade is so persistent. With such huge profits at stake, it fuels an entire network of cartels, traffickers, and smugglers who will stop at nothing to get their products into the hands of American consumers. And it's not just a few small-time operations involved here. The scale of this trade is huge. For example, federal authorities recently seized 7,000 pounds of that white powder, 3 times the amount they intercepted last year. That's a huge increase and shows just how much product is being moved through the system. A bust like that doesn't come from small-time players. These are major trafficking organizations with big money, big operations, and resources to move large amounts of drugs across the country and around the globe.
The American illicit drugs market is the biggest in the world, worth annually more than $80 billion. Last year, federal authorities intercepted 7,000 pounds of cocaine, 3 times the amount seized the previous year.
This increase in drug seizures isn't just about the work of law enforcement. It's a clear sign that the cartels are getting more creative and sophisticated. They're constantly evolving their methods to stay ahead of the authorities, and that's why we're seeing more and more of these massive hauls.
The drug smuggling operation is highly organized, and there are plenty of people prepared to risk imprisonment for the large amounts of money offered by the dealers. Some will even go through the uncomfortable process of swallowing plastic bags filled with narcotics, something that can end in death if the bags burst.
Cartels are using everything from hidden compartments in vehicles to semi-submersibles, yes, underwater drug subs, and even tunnels that go beneath the border to get their products through. They've got the tech and the resources to move drugs in ways that make it harder for law enforcement to track them down, and they've also got money to pay. Narco-tunnels. The El Chapo connection. We can't talk about sophisticated drug smuggling operations without talking about one of the most innovative smuggling channels ever created by a drug lord. El Chapo's underground tunnels used to smuggle drugs from Mexico and the US.
Drug tunnels have been built predominantly on the US-Mexican border, where they've taken drugs from cities like Tijuana to San Diego.
El Chapo's infamous use of tunnels to smuggle drugs into the United States became a game changer in the world of narcotics trafficking. His tunneling operations set a precedent for the cartels, showing just how effective and sophisticated underground smuggling could be. While traditional methods of drug smuggling, such as hiding narcotics in vehicles or shipping containers, have been used for decades, El Chapo revolutionized the way drugs could be moved across the US-Mexico border by using elaborate, purpose-built tunnels.
They were developed mostly in the 1990s, and particularly by a very famous Mexican drug kingpin called Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who famously escaped a supermax prison in Mexico by getting mining engineers to build a tunnel and then escaping through that tunnel on a motorbike.
The tunnels El Chapo built were nothing like the underground passages you see in spy movies. These were fully functional, with all the bells and whistles. They had electricity, so traffickers could see what they were doing in the dark, and even ventilation systems to keep the air breathable. Without proper ventilation, the tunnels would have been dangerous to work in, but with these systems, people could work in them for long stretches of time without worrying about suffocating. On top of that, El Chapo's tunnels often had rail systems, allowing drug shipments to be moved quickly and efficiently from one side of the border to the other. It was basically a well-oiled underground operation. What made these tunnels so effective was how deep and well-hidden they were. They often started in warehouses or homes on the Mexican side and would stretch underground for hundreds of feet, sometimes all the way under the US border. Once on the American side, the tunnels would pop up in hidden spots, places where law enforcement wouldn't think to look. These tunnels allowed cartels to bypass all the border walls and fences that were supposed to keep drugs out, making it almost impossible for the authorities to stop them. Even though border security has tightened up since El Chapo's time, these tunnels are still incredibly hard to detect. They're deep underground, and the traffickers go to great lengths to hide them. Some tunnels go undetected for years, allowing cartels to move huge amounts of drugs without anyone knowing. The sophistication of these operations means that authorities are constantly playing catch-up, trying to find ways to detect these tunnels before they're used. El Chapo's success in building these tunnels didn't just stop with him. Other cartels quickly saw how effective these underground routes were and started building their own networks. Over time, these tunnels have only gotten more advanced, with even more features and better security, making them even harder to detect. Today, cartels still rely heavily on these methods to move drugs into the US, and the authorities are left scrambling to figure out how to stop them. Human mules. The deadly practice of swallowing drugs. When you think about how drugs are smuggled into the US, you might imagine high-tech submarines or cleverly hidden compartments in cars. But one of the most dangerous methods involves real people. People who are forced or paid to swallow or insert packets of drugs into their bodies, risking their lives just to move narcotics across the border. It's a brutal reality, and it's something that cartels rely on heavily because, sadly, these people are often seen as disposable pawns in the bigger drug trade game.
If you're carrying as a mule packets of cocaine and one ruptures, the acute powder of cocaine is rapidly absorbed. It creates a disaster in your stomach. The first thing they usually feel is muscle contraction, pain. Then they complain of chest pain because now the heart's starting to be affected.
The process typically involves swallowing small packets of drugs, cocaine, heroin, meth, or other substances, which are wrapped tightly in condoms or plastic to try and contain the drugs until they reach their destination. Some traffickers go even further, having individuals smuggle drugs in their stomachs or rectums. The idea is simple: bypass all detection methods at border checkpoints by hiding the drugs inside their bodies. However, the risk is astronomical. If even one of those packets bursts due to pressure, the digestive acids in the stomach, or simple human error, the results can be catastrophic, and not to mention, fatal. Submarine now. They've come up with more innovative ways of smuggling, and one of the most advanced methods they've turned to involves semi-submersibles and full submarines, often referred to as narco-subs. These aren't your average boats. We're talking about high-tech, covert vessels built to carry huge amounts of illegal cargo while staying hidden from the authorities. The cartels are pouring millions of dollars into these operations, investing in secret boatyards where these vessels are assembled, often far from prying eyes.
Este es Juanes Costas de los Estados Unidos. ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco!
So why do they go to such lengths? Simply put, narco subs can carry thousands of kilos of drugs, and they're incredibly hard to detect. Unlike traditional smuggling methods, these semi-submersibles and submarines are designed to stay just beneath the surface of the water, making them extremely difficult for radar or satellites to pick up. Their stealthy design allows them to slip past most law enforcement and military detection systems undetected, even for extended periods. This makes them perfect for long-distance smuggling, especially when trying to avoid the heavy scrutiny of borders and coastlines. In fact, these narco-subs are so effective that some have made it all the way to Europe, traveling across the Atlantic without being intercepted. One of the most remarkable examples came when a narco-sub was found off the coast of Spain.
Auto to Barco! Auto to Barco! That's gonna be hard to get on! Auto to Barco!
This particular vessel had completed an incredible journey across the Atlantic, carrying a massive haul of cocaine, tens of tons, into Europe. The journey was long and dangerous, but the sub managed to evade detection the whole way, slipping under the radar and dodging any law enforcement trying to catch it. When the sub was finally discovered, it was one of the largest drug busts ever, with a cargo worth millions of dollars. What's especially chilling about this is that these narco-subs aren't a one-time thing. They've become a key part of the cartel's strategy for moving drugs across the world. The fact that they can transport such huge quantities of drugs across oceans, undetected, speaks to how well they plan these operations. I mean, the level of sophistication involved is pretty staggering. It's not just about smuggling a little bit of product here and there. It's about making huge shipments across long distances without ever being caught. And it's not just about getting drugs from point A to point B. These subs can travel under the radar for weeks, using minimal resources and avoiding the usual choke points where law enforcement would typically try to stop them. They can sneak past Coast Guard patrols, evade satellite tracking, and even slip under military radar systems. It's a terrifying reminder of how innovative and relentless cartels can be when it comes to staying ahead of the authorities. The rise of narco-subs is forcing authorities to rethink how they approach smuggling and drug interdiction. Traditional methods of tracking smuggling routes are no longer enough, especially when dealing with a method that operates so far beneath the surface. Catching these subs has become one of the biggest challenges for global law enforcement, as they can be hundreds of miles offshore before anyone even realizes they're there. The scale of this problem is hard to overstate. Narco-subs aren't just smuggling small amounts of drugs anymore. They're bringing massive loads of cocaine, heroin, and other illicit substances into countries on multiple continents. What makes these operations even more daunting is the fact that the cartels are constantly improving their methods. As authorities find ways to intercept one tactic, the cartels come up with something new, making it an ongoing game of cat and mouse. For law enforcement, it's a tough battle that seems to get harder every year. Which brings us to the submersible, fake produce, disguising drugs as everyday items.
Smuggled in this delicious fruit was cocaine.
Imagine this, a shipment of avocados, limes, or even watermelons. Totally normal, right? But inside these seemingly harmless produce items, traffickers have hollowed them out and filled them with drugs like cocaine or marijuana. On the surface, they look like just another batch of fresh fruit, but inside, they're hiding a much darker secret. This technique is genius in its simplicity. Fruits and vegetables are so common in shipments, especially at border crossings, that they don't raise suspicion. Border Patrol agents deal with loads of produce every day, so it's easy for a bag of avocados to blend in with everything else. That's exactly why cartels use them, because it's not out of the ordinary for a shipment of fruits to make its way across the border. So, traffickers get away with smuggling drugs inside these innocuous-looking items, tapping into the mundanity of everyday produce to fly under the radar. One of the most popular choices for these smuggling operations is avocados. They're thick-skinned and relatively easy to hollow out. The traffickers carefully carve out the flesh, fill the hollowed-out space with drugs, and then reseal the skin, making it look almost undisturbed. The trick is in the detail. The skin of the avocado has to be manipulated just enough to make it look like a normal fruit, while still keeping the drugs hidden inside. It's incredibly effective because avocados are heavy, and they're a popular export from places like Mexico. So the shipments are already being sent in bulk, making it easier to hide drugs without arousing suspicion. Trap cars, the art of concealment in plain sight.
These so-called trap cars with secret departments in which you can hide fairly large quantities of drugs if you know what you're doing.
Cartels are known for their creativity when it comes to smuggling drugs, and one of the most sophisticated methods they use is modifying vehicles with hidden compartments. These vehicles are often tricked out to look completely normal from the outside, but inside, they've been transformed into secret storage spaces that are used to smuggle drugs or cash across borders. The thing is, these compartments aren't just thrown together. They're designed with a level of precision and creativity that can make them almost impossible to detect unless you know exactly where to look.
The bottom of the center console, underneath the fake bottom, is a switch. Turn it down, nothing happens. But turn it up, and there goes the back seat, revealing a trap containing a stash of contraband.
These hidden compartments can be incredibly hard to spot unless you know exactly what you're looking for. For example, imagine you're a border agent and you're looking at a car that seems perfectly normal until you find out that the back seat is actually a secret stash space, only accessible if you press a hidden button. It's stuff like this that makes Cartel's operations so tough to crack. They design these compartments to blend in perfectly so they don't raise any suspicion when the car is being checked. The idea is to make it look like just another regular vehicle, so law enforcement doesn't think twice. And sometimes, it's not just about having one small hidden space. Cartels go all out, building custom compartments in the most unexpected places. One real-life case involved agents discovering a car with a secret compartment in the back seat that was built to hide a massive load of cocaine. The compartment was accessed with a special button near the driver's seat, and without knowing the right sequence, it would have been impossible to find. In another case, agents uncovered a truck that had a hidden compartment in its gas tank. That's right, beneath the fuel tank was a cleverly concealed stash of hundreds of pounds of methamphetamine. To access the compartment, agents would have had to remove bolts and use a special tool, something that most people wouldn't even think to do. The level of detail and engineering behind these compartments is mind-blowing, and it shows just how serious cartels are about getting their drugs through the border undetected. But here's the really scary part. These vehicles aren't just used for smuggling drugs into the US, they're also used to smuggle weapons south into Mexico. Cartels have long relied on firearms to maintain power and control, and these hidden compartments provide an easy way to get weapons across the border. Some of these compartments are designed to hide everything from guns and ammo to grenade launchers, making them incredibly hard to spot. It's a double whammy. The cartels are sending drugs north and weapons south, and law enforcement is left trying to keep up.
And a lot of these cars have been developed on the US side of the border to take huge quantities of weapons down south to Mexico, where they're then distributed and sold just as cheaply as you can buy them in a Walmart.
Catapults and cannons. Medieval tech meets modern smuggling.
Border Patrol agents near Douglas, Arizona found a catapult attached to the border wall made to chuck bundles of marijuana into American territory. More than 47 pounds of the drug found.
When you think of the border wall, you probably imagine high-tech surveillance, patrolling agents, and sophisticated methods to stop smuggling. But what if I told you that cartels have been using catapults and cannons to hurl drugs over the border wall? Yeah, you heard that right. These cartels aren't just relying on the usual tactics. They've gotten creative, rigging up makeshift launch stations and using simple but surprisingly effective devices to launch bundles of marijuana or other drugs into the US. It sounds like something out of a movie, right? Well, in reality, it's a tactic that traffickers have actually used, and believe it or not, it's been surprisingly successful at times. The idea is simple. If you can't get drugs through a border checkpoint, why not throw them over the wall? One of the most notorious examples of this happened in California, where border agents found a catapult set up on the Mexican side of the wall. The catapult was constructed with a large wooden frame, a rubber band, and other basic materials. And while it wasn't exactly state-of-the-art weaponry, it did the job. Authorities discovered bundles of narcotics on the US side of the border, and when they traced them back to the launch site, they found a makeshift launch pad, complete with a large rubber band mechanism to fling the bundles over the wall. These bundles were neatly packed, wrapped in plastic, and ready for distribution in the US. It was as if the cartels had taken an ancient warfare technique and put their own criminal spin on it. But the catapults weren't the only thing cartels have used to launch drugs over the border. In some instances, they've also rigged up cannons. These aren't the big military cannons you might picture, but more like homemade devices that use compressed air or explosive force to launch drug packages across the border. One case in Arizona saw authorities uncover a cannon hidden in the desert with a carefully constructed platform designed to fire bundles of marijuana over the border wall. The cannon was fitted with a long barrel, and bundles were loaded into the cannon before being fired with incredible force.
Andrew Thornton fell to his death carrying too heavy of a load of cocaine while parachuting.
Planes and paragliders taking to the skies. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, the skies were wild with daring drug runners, smugglers who turned the airspace above the US-Mexico border into their personal highway for transporting massive amounts of cocaine and other drugs. This was the golden age of the cocaine cowboys, a term that's come to represent the audacious pilots who flew small planes packed with drugs, risking their lives to avoid border patrols and evade radar detection. These guys weren't just following the rules, they were rewriting them, finding new ways to use the sky to their advantage. Flying at night, low and fast, these smugglers would use small planes like Cessnas, which could fly just under radar coverage and land in remote areas. They'd drop off their illicit cargo, either by parachuting bundles of cocaine or landing in hidden airstrips, and then take off again, blending back into the night. It was a crazy, high-risk operation. Imagine being in the cockpit, knowing that if you get caught, you're in for some serious trouble. But for the smugglers, the payoff was huge. Even after the height of the seat cane cowboy days, the skies haven't gotten any less important for the cartels. Today, planes are still being used, but the game has changed. Instead of flying massive loads of drugs on big planes, traffickers are getting sneakier with smaller, harder-to-detect aircraft like ultralights and paragliders. These are tiny, lightweight planes that can easily slip under the radar, literally. The cool thing, or maybe the scary thing, is that these aircraft are so small and fly so low that they're not picked up by most surveillance systems. Semi-submersible. When it comes to smuggling drugs into the United States, cartels have really stepped up their game, and one of the most sophisticated methods they've perfected is the use of semi-submersibles, essentially low-profile vessels designed to slip below the radar, literally and figuratively.
$100,000 cruiser with 2 young men on board is a classic profile case.
You guys got any guns? Okay, we're gonna board you, check your papers.
A radio linked to customs headquarters indicates the agent's suspicions are well-founded.
These semi-submersibles, which are partially submerged in water, allow traffickers to transport massive amounts of drugs while avoiding traditional detection methods like radar and satellites. By staying just below the water surface, they can travel undetected for long distances, evading Coast Guard patrols and security checkpoints.
Over the last decade, particularly emerging from Colombia, but there's been a set of semi-submersibles, a couple of which have been caught by the US Coast Guard, which don't fully submerge, but just appear above the water. And they've also been used to take cocaine up the coast and bypass the border.
Drones, the latest in high-tech smuggling.
Pues sí, como por ejemplo los carteles que tienen que mantener su gente y todo, tienen que sacar dinero donde hay. Si ya se acabaron sus reservas, pues tienen que buscarlo.
How old are you guys?
Yo tengo 27.
As if the tactics we've covered weren't already mind-blowing, enter the latest innovation in drug smuggling, drones. Yep, you heard that right. Drones have become the new tool of choice for cartels looking to make quick, quiet, and stealthy runs across the US-Mexico border. These little flying machines are taking smuggling to a whole new level, and it's almost hard to believe how effective they've become in such a short time. Drones aren't as big as planes, but they don't need to be. While they can't carry massive loads like a Cessna or ultralight, they're perfect for smaller shipments, say a few kilos of sea cane, meth, or even fentanyl. The beauty of drones, though, is that they're incredibly hard to detect. They don't leave a significant radar footprint, and since they fly so low to the ground, they can zip under the radar, literally, without anyone noticing. Border patrols are designed to look for bigger threats, planes or trucks, but drones are small and quiet, which makes them the perfect choice for sneaking drugs into the US. Cartels have caught on to this quickly. They figured out that drones can fly short distances, dropping packages in remote areas on either side of the border, where waiting teams can easily scoop them up without drawing too much attention. It's a simple but incredibly effective method that has authorities struggling to keep up. Imagine a cartel member loading a drone with a small package of drugs and sending it off across the border in the dead of night. By the time anyone notices, the drugs have already landed and the crew is already en route to pick them up. And these aren't just toy drones you'd find in a hobby store. No, cartels are investing in high-end drones, some capable of carrying several pounds of illicit goods. They've even gone as far as to modify these drones, adding custom modifications like enhanced motors for greater range or specialized payload areas to securely hold the drugs during flight. It's an entirely new level of smuggling, high-tech, almost impossible to stop, and way harder to track than anything we've seen before. The scariest part is that, because drones are so small and so difficult to spot, the smugglers can fly multiple runs in a short amount of time without risking detection. Even if authorities catch one drone, by the time they've tracked it, there could be several more already airborne and in the process of completing their mission. It's efficient, fast, and it works. Perfect for cartels who need to keep moving products quickly. Drones might just be the beginning of what's next. With technology constantly advancing, we could see drones getting even bigger and more powerful, or maybe even being used in swarms to smuggle large amounts of drugs. The traffickers are already showing that they're willing to think outside the box and use anything that gives them an edge. Law enforcement is playing a serious game of catch-up, trying to figure out how to deal with this new tech. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more captivating stories. Until next time, stay safe, and in the meantime, if you're looking for something similar, check out this video.